I had spent a lot of my 20s gravitating to ways of seeking Jesus that looked kind of radical. They were, I was like living in intentional community for part of it. I was working with the homeless and folks struggling with addiction. I'd gone overseas and worked among the poor, kind of outward, sort of risky things. And then I found myself in my early 30s sitting in my small house with my kids, with my regular, ordinary neighbors in Nashville, Tennessee. I felt more kind of low-grade anxiety than I had in living in like ways that seemed much more risky. Certainly more than I felt when I was in kind of this like war-torn area of East Africa. And I thought, that's weird. That's weird that I feel more anxious and more afraid here. And I realized it was that I didn't know how to seek God where I was. I didn't know how to seek the kingdom of God in the actual lived life I had. So I kind of went on a quest to figure out how my regular life mattered in the kingdom and why God cares about ordinary life. And there were some books that were coming out at the time that were like, they all had names like boring and ordinary, and kind of were wrestling with this sort of in reaction to books that had come out the few years before that were all like radical and explosive and on fire. And they were all really good books. They were and they were reminding me kind of your ordinary life matters, your mundane life matters. But I thought, but why? Is this just kind of another mantra that I need to hold in my head, like as I'm folding the laundry, thinking this matters to Jesus? Like, why does our ordinary life matter? And that's when I came on the idea of formation, that, and particularly the work of James K.A. Smith. It talks about how our practices and habits are kind of liturgies that shape us, that shape our desires, that shape our loves, that form who we are. And the idea of spiritual formation and habitual liturgical formation began to cast some light on kind of why and how ordinary life matters, why and how our mundane days matter. Our daily life is the crucible of our formation. The place that we are formed as disciples is not in our imaginations. It's not in the life we think we ought to be living. It's in the actual context that we live. That is where we are shaped and formed. So daily discipleship looks daily. It looks mundane. And so I wrote this book wanting to look at very particular moments in the day, looking at spiritual formation in kind of its molecular form, in the smallest form possible. What does it look like to be shaped as a disciple of Jesus in a completely ordinary day? In order to do that, I structured Liturgy of the Ordinary around one completely ordinary day. So I took one day and began at waking and end at sleeping, and walk through really normal, ordinary moments of that day. So brushing your teeth, making the bed, getting stuck in traffic, getting in an argument with my spouse, drinking tea. And I looked at these particular moments of the day, and I paired them with part of our gathered liturgy, particularly the Anglican gathered liturgy, but this would apply also to all kind of quote-unquote liturgical worship or ancient forms of worship, including Lutheran and Catholic ways of worshiping. And I did that because I wanted to sort of freeze frame on these regular moments and kind of use them to say, where is God at work in our daily life? And then I wanted to take these what we consider kind of sacred moments of gathered worship or spiritual moments and show how the formation that we have in our liturgies on Sunday echoes back into our daily life and forms us, but also how the formation in our daily life shapes us and affects our spiritual life in deep ways that sends us back into worship, that these parts of our life are completely integrated. So as an Anglican priest, I wanted to explore liturgies of daily life, and that word liturgy can be foreign to some people or new, but I will get into what I mean by that in subsequent sessions together. But I want mainly to say that I'm looking at habits and practices and repetitive practices that form and shape us as disciples of Jesus in our daily life, but also the habits and practices that malform us, that shape us in ways that make us less open to walking as the beloved of God and remembering the gospel in our daily life.